Astrid Blackwood had always been fascinated by the stars. From a young age, she would spend hours gazing up at the night sky, tracing constellations with her finger and dreaming of the mysteries that lay beyond Earth's atmosphere. Her passion for astronomy led her to pursue a career in astrophysics, and now at the age of 28, she found herself standing at the threshold of her wildest dreams. The Atacama Large Millimeter Array, or ALMA, Observatory in Chile's remote Atacama Desert was a marvel of modern science. Its array of 66 high-precision antennas spread across the barren landscape like alien sentinels, their white dishes gleaming under the harsh desert sun. Astrid's heart raced as she stepped out of the transport vehicle, her long dark hair whipping around her face in the dry wind. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the observatory's head of operations, greeted Astrid with a warm smile. "Welcome to ALMA, Dr. Blackwood. We're thrilled to have you join our team." Astrid returned the smile, her blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. I can't wait to get started." As Elena led Astrid on a tour of the facility, the young astrophysicist couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The corridors seemed unusually empty, and there was a palpable tension in the air. When they reached the main control room, Astrid's attention was immediately drawn to a large screen displaying a series of complex star charts and data readouts. "What's this project?" Astrid asked, her scientific curiosity piqued. Elena's smile faltered for a moment. "That's Dr. Hawthorne's personal research. He'll brief you on it later." Astrid nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the days passed, she immersed herself in her work, analyzing data from distant galaxies and searching for signs of exoplanets. But the nagging sense of unease persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. It was during her third week at ALMA that Astrid stumbled upon the truth. Late one night, unable to sleep due to the high altitude and her racing thoughts, she decided to return to the control room to review some data. As she approached, she heard hushed voices coming from inside. "The subject's brainwaves are unlike anything we've seen before," a man's voice said, low and intense. "If we can replicate this pattern, we might finally achieve contact." Astrid's blood ran cold. She recognized the voice as belonging to Dr. Victor Hawthorne, the observatory's reclusive director whom she had only met briefly upon her arrival. Peering through the crack in the door, she saw Hawthorne hunched over a console, his gaunt face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. Beside him stood Elena, her expression a mixture of concern and fascination. "But at what cost, Victor?" Elena whispered. "These people, they're not lab rats. We can't keep doing this." Hawthorne turned to face Elena, his eyes blazing with a fervor that sent chills down Astrid's spine. "We're on the brink of the greatest discovery in human history, Elena. A few sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." Astrid's mind reeled as she pieced together the implications of what she had just heard. The empty corridors, the secretive research, the strange data patterns she had glimpsed. It all pointed to something far more sinister than she could have imagined. Over the next few days, Astrid carefully probed her colleagues for information, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. She learned that her predecessor, Dr. James Chen, had mysteriously disappeared 6 months ago, leaving behind a trove of research on the connection between stellar phenomena and human consciousness. As Astrid delved deeper into Chen's work, she uncovered a terrifying truth. Hawthorne had been conducting illegal experiments on individuals with heightened sensory abilities, believing them to be star children, capable of communicating with extraterrestrial intelligence. The data she had seen wasn't just from distant stars, it was the neural patterns of human test subjects, forcibly aligned with cosmic radiation. Astrid's horror grew as she realized the full extent of Hawthorne's madness. He wasn't just theorizing about human-alien communication. He was actively trying to create a hybrid consciousness, one that could bridge the gap between Earth and the stars. As she sat in her small, sparsely furnished room, Astrid's mind raced with the implications of her discovery. Her hands trembled as she clutched a mug of lukewarm coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to calm her frayed nerves. She knew she had to act, to expose Hawthorne's crimes and save the victims of his twisted experiments. But in this isolated facility, surrounded by vast expanses of desert, who could she trust? The next morning, Astrid was summoned to Hawthorne's office. As she entered the dimly lit room, she felt her heart pounding in her chest. Hawthorne sat behind a massive desk, his thin frame dwarfed by the large window behind him that offered a panoramic view of the antenna array. "Dr. Blackwood," Hawthorne said, his voice soft but intense. "I've been observing your work since you arrived. Your ability to perceive patterns in stellar data is remarkable." Astrid forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thank you, Dr. Hawthorne. I'm just doing my job." Hawthorne leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling light. "But it's more than that, isn't it? You see things others don't. Connections that elude even our most sophisticated algorithms." As Hawthorne spoke, Astrid felt a creeping sense of dread. She realized with growing horror that she wasn't just here to replace Dr. Chen. She was being evaluated as the next test subject. "I have a special project I'd like you to be a part of," Hawthorne continued, oblivious to Astrid's inner turmoil. "Something that could change the course of human history." Astrid knew she had to play along, at least for now. "That sounds fascinating, Dr. Hawthorne. What did you have in mind?" As Hawthorne launched into an explanation of his theories, Astrid's mind raced, formulating a plan. She nodded at appropriate intervals, asking questions that she hoped would make her seem eager and compliant. All the while, she was acutely aware of the danger she was in. That night, Astrid put her plan into action. Using her access codes, she broke into the secure data storage facility, determined to gather evidence of Hawthorne's crimes. As she downloaded files onto a portable drive, she heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through her as she quickly hid the drive and pretended to be working at a terminal. The door opened, and Elena stepped in, her eyes widening in surprise. "Astrid, what are you doing here so late?" Thinking quickly, Astrid forced a laugh. "Oh, you know how it is. Got caught up in some data analysis and lost track of time." Elena's eyes narrowed suspiciously, but she nodded. "Well, don't work too hard. We need you fresh for tomorrow's observations." As Elena left, Astrid let out a shaky breath. She knew her time was running out. She had to act fast. The next day, as the sun set over the Atacama Desert, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Astrid made her move. She had carefully planned her escape, timing it with a scheduled maintenance window when the security systems would be briefly offline. Heart pounding, she slipped out of her room and made her way towards the vehicle bay. She had almost reached it when an alarm blared through the facility. Cursing under her breath, Astrid broke into a run. She could hear shouts behind her as she burst into the vehicle bay. Jumping into the nearest Jeep, she fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking with adrenaline. The engine roared to life just as Hawthorne and his security team entered the bay. "Stop her!" Hawthorne's voice echoed off the metal walls, filled with rage and desperation. Astrid slammed her foot on the accelerator, the Jeep lurching forward. She crashed through the bay doors, the cool night air hitting her face as she sped out into the desert. But Hawthorne wasn't about to let his prized subject escape so easily. Within minutes, Astrid could see headlights in her rearview mirror. The chase was on. As Astrid navigated the treacherous desert terrain, her mind raced faster than the Jeep. She knew the odds were stacked against her. Even if she managed to outrun her pursuers, where could she go? The nearest town was hours away, and she had limited fuel and supplies. Suddenly, an idea struck her. The antenna array. If she could reach it, she might be able to send a distress signal. It was a long shot, but it was her only hope. Veering off the main road, Astrid steered the Jeep towards the looming shapes of the radio telescopes. Behind her, she could hear the roar of engines as Hawthorne's team gave chase. As she approached the base of one of the massive antennas, Astrid abandoned the jeep and began to climb. The metal was cold against her hands, and the wind whipped around her, threatening to tear her from her precarious perch. She had almost reached the control panel when she heard Hawthorne's voice below her. "It's over, Astrid. Come down now, and we can talk about this rationally." Astrid looked down to see Hawthorne standing at the base of the antenna, his face twisted with a mixture of anger and pleading. Behind him, Elena and several security guards watched with tense expressions. "There's nothing to talk about," Astrid shouted back, her voice carried away by the wind. "What you're doing is wrong, and I won't be a part of it." As she turned back to the control panel, she felt the antenna shudder. Looking down, she saw that Hawthorne had begun to climb after her, his face set in grim determination. Time seemed to slow as Astrid realized the terrible choice before her. She could surrender and become another of Hawthorne's victims, or she could risk everything in a desperate bid for freedom. In that moment, as she stood atop the antenna with the vast, star-filled sky above her and the unforgiving desert below, Astrid made her decision. She began to input a distress code into the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. Hawthorne, seeing what she was doing, let out a roar of fury and lunged for her. Astrid, caught off guard, lost her footing. For a heart-stopping moment, she teetered on the edge of the antenna platform. Then, she was falling. As the ground rushed up to meet her, Astrid's last thoughts were of the stars she had loved so dearly. In her final moments, she saw them not as distant, cold points of light, but as a vast, interconnected web of energy and consciousness, perhaps the very thing Hawthorne had been searching for all along. The impact, when it came, was mercifully quick. In the days that followed, the official story was that Dr. Astrid Blackwood had suffered a tragic accident while conducting late-night observations. But as investigations into the Alma Observatory began, spurred by the mysterious distress signal that had been broadcast moments before Astrid's death, the truth slowly came to light. Hawthorne's experiments were exposed, his victims freed, and the scientific community was left to grapple with the ethical implications of his research. And on clear nights, when the stars shone brightest over the Atacama Desert, some swore they could see a new constellation, one that looked uncannily like a falling woman, forever reaching for the sky.